Welcome back. Chapter 19. Summer Hill, Virginia, 1970. Sorry, but we aren't open yet, the bartender said. Come back in a couple of hours. Kit put a $50 bill on the bar. I want a beer and keep the change. I guess I just opened. He poured a beer, put it in front of Kit, then stood there watching him brood. So which one did you choose? What? The bartender was wiping the counter. I assume you're here because you're after one of the girls? Or did you come into town to see your other choices? Kit looked at the man like he was crazy. Girls? The bartender nodded at Kit's tan. You've been in the sun so long you forgot about them? Kit signed. Girls are all I think about. That's normal. It's what I did at your age, so which one is it? Kit frowned. I have no idea what you're talking about. Betty Snyder, Shirley Williamson. Last night they were in here talking about the rich naked guy who's a relative of Uncle Freddie. They were saying they were going out to Tatwell to meet him. You're him, right? Kit took a deep drink of his beer. Rich naked guy, he mumbled. That describes me perfectly. Did they show up? Who? The bartender glared at him. Kit shrugged. Oh, yeah, there was some young women there today. I didn't talk to them. Didn't? The bartender leaned forward. Listen, those two girls are hot to trot, if you know what I mean. They used to be the queens of the local high school, but now they just want a man. Betty is the smarter of the two. Shirley's the nicer one, but she won't let you out of her sight. If you want to see what else is in town, I can put the word out. If you come back at about 7, every unmarried girl within 50 miles will be here. And a few married ones, if that's what you want. Kit was looking at the bartender as though he were from another planet, but then his eyes changed. He smiled as though he might like being hit on by lots of randy women. You're from here? Born and bred. What's Olivia Paget like? The man stepped back from the bar and looked at Kit. You've gone that way, have you? Well, give it up. She's the prettiest girl in town, but she wants none of us. She may have been born a small town girl, but she's not one. Her heart is somewhere else. He stood there looking at Kit, whose head was so low it was practically touching the counter. Got it bad, have you? Yeah, Kit said. Very bad. Oh, poor guy. I fell for a girl like that. She was way above me. Let me give you some advice. Olivia Paget isn't for some kid who runs around mostly naked and cleans up cemeteries. Yeah, we heard about that. I think maybe I did a really stupid thing today. Livy sent the girls away. You mean Betty and Shirley? Why'd she do that? I can't imagine Livy taking an interest in them. When she lived here, while the rest of us were having backyard barbecues, Livy was in Richmond taking lessons for her future life. And this was when she was 12. So why did she send the girls away? It's more like she'd laugh about them being there to check you out. Olivia has a sense of humor that can cut glass. Kit looked up at the man, his face showing the misery he was feeling. The bartender's eyes widened. You don't think? Olivia couldn't be. He let out a snort of laughter. You think Olivia sent those girls away because she's interested in you? And some kid who mows the grass? He gave a genuine laugh. One thing I'll say for you, kid, you got a pair on you. I think the absence of a brain counterbalances my overwhelming sense of self, Kit said as he drained his beer, then left the bar. Watching the doors close, the bartender shook his head. Overwhelming sense of self, he quoted. Keep talking like that, and who knows, kid, you might have a chance with Livy after all. But then he thought of all the young men who made passes at Olivia Paget and failed. Nope, not possible. Laughing, he went to the storeroom to get more beer. It was Nina who solved it all. First, she found out where Kit and Olivia had gone in their separate runaways. She got an earful from the bartender at the tavern that was a few miles down the road. Kit had already been there and left. As for Olivia, she was a local girl. She walked to the road and someone she knew stopped and gave her a ride. Nina called Mrs. Paget, gave her a brief explanation of what had happened, then said that if she heard where Olivia was, please let them know. Next, Nina tackled the family by giving them a piece of her mind. The two old men and the children had assumed that Olivia had betrayed them. She was protecting the lot of you, Nina said, and went on from there. The children were so fascinated at seeing Uncle Freddie and Mr. Gates getting bawled out by Letty's mother, they were almost having a good time. After she finished, Nina left the house and used her ever-present coat hanger wire to try to scratch under her cast. She was very annoyed with all of them. When she got home, her phone was ringing. It was Mrs. Paget saying that Livy had come home, gone to her bedroom, and shut the door. She said her husband was out looking for Kit. And I'm packing. We're going to spend a few days at the lake cabin. Good idea, Nina said as she kept scratching. Her anger had made the itch worse. An hour later, Miss Paget called again to whisper that Kit was there and she and her husband were leaving the house. We don't plan to be back for 2 days. Make it 3, Nina said. I hope I'm not making a mistake, Miss Paget said. You aren't, Nina answered. They said goodbye and hung up. That's the end of chapter 19. What is Nina about to do? And Olivia's mother is in on it. They're going to plan to get them back together. Okay, we're about to see chapter 20. When Olivia stopped talking, Kathy and Elise were silent, waiting for her to go on, but she said nothing. I want to know the rest of it, Elise said. Olivia blinked away tears. We had 6 weeks of perfection. It's a cliche to say that we had heaven on earth, but we did. She took a breath. My parents had an alternative motive for leaving Kit and me alone in their house. They were proud about my Broadway role, but they really just wanted me to settle down and have babies. I didn't know it, but after my dad met Kit, he did some checking and he liked what he heard. By leaving us there, my parents were matchmaking. I knew it. Did you and Kit stay there? Elise asked. In the house, alone? Olivia gave a little smile. If you're asking about sex, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. Sweaty, exhausting, all-consuming, never-ending sex. At the end of 3 days, I knew his body as well as my own. Kathy and Elise were smiling. When my mother called to tell us they were returning, Kit and I went back to Tatwell. No one made a big deal of it, but they were very glad to see us, and we felt the same way. Olivia had to pause, closing her eyes for a moment. For weeks, we were a very happy family. We were joyous that Uncle Freddie was alive, that Ace's mother was hanging on, and Kit and I were full of laughter. She gave a one-sided grin. We used the well house as our private place. Kit bent some galvanized siding to make a sort of a tunnel so we didn't get torn up by the thorns, and he put lots of cracked corn by the entrance. So the peacock would be your guard, Elise said. Olivia nodded. It was a divinely happy time. All of us lived very well together. To this day, Kit thinks we didn't know it, but dear little Ace started sleeping with him. The child knew what was coming and he needed comfort. But it all ended, Kathy said. Olivia took several deep breaths. My life changed because I went to Richmond. No, that's not true. It changed because the day before I said those words, I love you. I hadn't meant to, but it was just before I was to leave and they came out. Kit kissed me, but he didn't say the words back to me. She paused. That afternoon, he nearly killed himself, clearing a half-acre where Uncle Freddie's swimming pool was going to be put in, and the next morning he slept late. I was so annoyed with him for not telling me he loved me that when Mr. Gates said he was taking Uncle Freddie into Richmond for 6 months checkup, I said I'd go with him. She was silent for a few moments. As I was leaving, I tiptoed into Kit's room and looked at him sleeping. He had scratches on his face and soft black whiskers. He looked so good that I almost stayed. But unfortunately, my anger overrode my passion. I bent over and kissed his forehead, then left the room. She turned away and whispered, I didn't see him again for over 40 years. Child. She looked at Kathy and Elise. When we got back, Kit wasn't there. Clothes, books, record, everything. It was as though he'd vanished. Poof! The completeness of his disappearance almost made me doubt that he'd ever existed. And that, You thought he ran away because you told him you loved him? Kathy said. I am ashamed to say yes, that's exactly what I thought. The kid said that Kit's father came to get him in a big black car. I thought that's what Kit had told them. I was too upset, too angry to realize that was their childish interpretation of what they'd seen. Man in a suit equals father. She is rude on her emotions, isn't she? She paused. I thought Kit had called his father and said, come and get me out of here, and he came running. Uncle Freddie said he called Kit's family and they said they didn't know where he was, but I thought they were lying. None of them knew that I said those 3 little words, so how could they know anything? Her voice was rising. What was the truth? Elise asked softly. Olivia took a few breaths. The military came for him. That's why he was there, hiding from his nosy family and tanning all over. He was preparing to go on an undercover mission. They knew what he'd taken with him, and they made sure they got it all. But he did manage to leave a message for me in the well house. Actually, it was a marriage proposal, along with his grandmother's ring. Olivia held out her hand to show the beautiful ring. White gold lacework with a big round diamond in the center. I didn't see it because I was so angry that I refused to ever again enter the well house. Oh, I didn't want to hear his name, to think about him, or when she looked up, her face was white. My stupidity still angers me and regrets eat at me, as it should. Love is stupid. There was venom in Elise's voice. Why did Kent love Carmen and not me? And why do I lust after? She sighed. There is no sense in love. I agree, Kathy said. My husband is one gorgeous hunk, but I wanted Andy, an ordinary-looking little man who has never so much as glanced at me. The 3 women were silent for a moment. You went to Broadway, Kathy asked. Just days after Kit vanished, I was on a plane to New York. For a moment, the women were silent, but then Kathy spoke, her voice puzzled. You trained to be an actress for most of your life, but you left your lifelong dream and returned home and married someone else, Elise said. Olivia seemed to be considering what to say, but in the end, she didn't reply. She stood up. I really do need to go to bed. Abruptly, without another word, she turned on her heels, grabbed a flashlight, and went out the front door. Wow, Elise said softly. 40 years? Kathy was staring at the door. I think she left out a lot of the story. Like what? Elise asked. Remember how she started? Nixon, Vietnam, and that no one was using birth control pills? Ooh, they picked up on it quick, did they? Elise said as she began to gather up dishes to take to the kitchen. Then she halted. She and Kathy exchanged looks. Let's leave this mess, Kathy said softly. I don't want Livy to be alone. We can clean it up tomorrow. That's a good idea. They walked back to the summer house in silence, each with her own thoughts. What had happened to Olivia's life was a travesty. and they wanted to prevent something similar happening in their own lives. The cottage was quiet, and upstairs, Elise paused outside of Olivia's door, but she heard nothing. That was because Olivia had had 40 years to learn how to cry in absolute silence. And that is the end of chapter 20. Wow. They picked up on the fact that back in those times there wasn't birth control. And if they had sex and sex and sex and sex, 1 + 1 = 2. And from listening to Olivia's story, they starting to think about their lives and how they need to make some decisions on their future. And that's a good thing with this conversation and this story that they're listening to. They're getting something out of it. But wow, that last sentence, she had 40 years to learn how to cry in absolute silence. That, I'm clearing my throat. I'm not getting emotional, I promise. I apologize. But that's deep. It seemed like a lot of women cry in silence. But daggone it. That's the end of this chapter. I shall see you in the next chapter. Bye for now.